and we once again welcome you to the GATE Academy. So in one of the earlier segments, we had discussed a very important topic related to the verbal reasoning and verbal ability questions that appear in the GATE exam, and which is word roots and stems. How words are formed and what are those roots and stems, very commonly used roots or stems which form so many different words in the English language. The questions that you get in your GATE exam related to verbal ability in the general aptitude section are almost always based on your understanding and learning of how different words and different sentences are formed. So today, we will discuss another very important topic which is again related to words and formation of words, which is called prefixes and suffixes. They are also commonly often called affixes, but we are not going to go into another confusing term, and we are just going to call them prefixes and suffixes. So, what are prefixes and what are suffixes? As the name itself suggests, a prefix is any particular root that is used before another root or another word or another stem to give a new or different meaning to the earlier word. For example, as you can see here, a prefix is always put before a root, stem or word. Almost always, very commonly, a prefix changes the meaning of the earlier word, that is the meaning of the main word. But importantly, whenever a prefix is put before a word, it does not change the part of the speech of the main word. Now, what do we mean by that? Now, as we are well aware that parts of speech means the different types of words that are used in the English language based on what are the functions or what are the meanings or what they describe. It could be nouns, it could be pronouns, it could be verbs, it could be adjectives, it could be adverbs, it could be conjunctions, it could be prepositions, it could be interjections. So there are so many different parts of speech. It could be an article. So here, the very important aspect is that in case of prefixes, they almost always change the meaning of the earlier word, but if the earlier word was a noun, there is a very good chance that after putting the prefix, the new word would also be a noun. Similarly, if the earlier word was an adjective or a verb, there is quite a good chance that if only a prefix is put before that verb or adjective, the new formed word would also be a verb or an adjective. However, this is not always the case, but more commonly the case. Now, as we can see, some of the very common prefixes that are used in the English language are re, dis, un, miss, out, over, as in words like rediscover, discovery, unfortunate, misunderstanding, outstanding, over the counter. So there are so many different kinds of words that can be formed using prefixes. Now we come to suffixes. As the name very well suggests, suffixes are those derivative roots or roots which are put at the end of other roots, stems or words, and here lies a significant difference. Like I had told you just a few moments ago, that whenever a prefix is put, it changes the meaning of the word but does not change the part of speech. That is, usually a noun remains a noun, or usually a verb remains a verb, or an adjective remains an adjective, usually, not always. But in case of a suffix, it is usually the case that if earlier there was a verb or a noun or an adjective, after putting a suffix, the nature of that part of speech is changed. That is, the new word that is formed after putting the suffix could become an adjective from a verb, or a noun from a verb, or an adverb from a verb, or from an adjective to a noun, or from a verb to a noun. So, often it is the case that quite often it is the case that once a suffix is put, if earlier the word was a noun or an adjective or an adverb or a verb, it may change to some other part of speech. So, as we can see here, suffixes are put after a root, stem or word. They usually change the part of speech of the main word. Very common suffixes that are used in the English language are ise, eyes, tion, perhaps the most common suffix that is used in the English language, shun, which is pronounced as ify, as in justify, or ate, activate, ing, again a very common suffix that is used, ringing, swinging, buying, cleaning, reading. Then here are some examples of words where both prefixes and suffixes are used to give you an idea of how prefixes and suffixes can actually change the meaning, as well as so many roots or stems or words can be actually changed to form so many different words. Like here you can see un is the prefix, fortune is the main core word, and ate is the suffix which makes it unfortunate. Similarly, reconstruction, inactive, and misunderstanding. So as you can see here by the way, I must say that this particular one, shun, sometimes can only have an ion here and sometimes it can have tion. So it is not necessary. Like in this case, construct itself is a word and ion attached to it can form this. In fact, quite often I would say that it is ion only as against tion. That's why we have put a T in brackets. Now, what we are going to do is that we are going to start learning of how suffixes and prefixes, when they are put before the words which are different parts of the speech, what new types of words or new types of parts of speech are formed. So, let's move ahead. So now, as you can see, we begin understanding and learning how to use different prefixes and suffixes with different parts of speech to form newer words and newer parts of speech. So the first thing here is how to use prefixes and suffixes to form words. And the first combination here is a prefix plus a verb to form another verb. As you can see in this table, the first column is the different types of prefixes, the second column is the meaning of each of those prefixes, and the final column is the examples of each category. So, we understand one by one. When the prefix is re, which means again or back, examples are restructure, reappear, rebuild, revisit, refinance. These are all very common words which most of you already know the meaning of or have already understood or used often. The next is dis, which means reverse the meaning of a verb. That is, whenever we put dis as a prefix, then whatever word is after that, the meaning of that new word is changed. Disappear, disallow, disarm, discontinue. All these words are actually the opposite of the original words which were appear, disallow, appear, allow, arm, and continue. So whenever we put dis, the meaning of the earlier word just becomes the opposite now. The next prefix is over, which means too much. Again, examples are overbook, overwork, oversleep, overload. Again, all these are verbs. All these are showing certain actions which have been done too much than required, much more than required. The next prefix is un, which again means reversing the meaning of the verb before which un is put. Examples are unfasten, uncover, unbound, untie, undo. The first word unfasten means like unfasten a seat belt or something like that, like whenever you put on a seat belt and then when you have to take it off, you say that you unfasten a seat belt. Next one is mis, M-I-S, the meaning of which is badly or wrongly. The examples are mislead, misinform, misunderstand. The words are very clear, the meanings are evident from the words themselves. So we come to the next prefix, which is out, which means more or better than others. Here, I'm sorry, the spelling should be M-O-R-E, more or better than others. Examples are outperform, outbid, outdo, Outbid basically means that when you are bidding for something, like you want to buy something and there are different groups or different people bidding for something. If you outbid, that means you quote a higher price for something. That means you have outbid the other people. Outdo means when you have done more than the others in any particular work or any particular activity. Outperform again means when your performance is better than most of the others in any group, then it says that you have outperformed than the others, or you are required to outperform than the others. Next prefix is be, which means make or cause. Examples are belittle, become, befriend. Now here the first word belittle actually means that whenever you are trying to make another person feel lesser than you, or trying to make another person's dignity or respect or the person's reputation lesser, or make the other person feel lesser in general, that's when you say that you are trying to belittle someone or someone is trying to belittle someone. So this word has a negative meaning attached to it. So these are some of the very important examples. Now we move on to some more examples. So here are some more sets of prefixes plus verbs which form words. So we start discussing one by one. The first one is co, meaning together. Examples are coexist, cooperate, co-own. Most are very common words that we have all read, heard and used. Next prefix is de, meaning do the opposite of. Examples are devalue, deselect, demean. Here the meaning of demean is something when you try to make someone else's actions or someone else's opinion or thinking as lesser than your own. When you try to do something like that, that process or that verb is called demean. Next prefix is fore, F-O-R-E, meaning earlier or before. Examples are foreclose, foresee. Now here the word foreclose means it is related to the field of finance, that whenever someone is not able to pay the regular installments or return the loan for any property, then that property is taken back by the government or whichever bank or whichever organization has lended money to buy that property. So that particular process is called foreclose. Then next is pre, meaning before. Examples are prejudge, pre-expose, pre-test. As you can very well see, these are all very simple words like judge, expose and test. So when we put the prefix pre before it, again we get very self-evident meaning words. There is nothing much to explain here. We come to the next prefix, which is inter, which means between. Examples are interact, intermix, intertwine. Here interact and intermix again are very common words. The word intertwine means that if there is something that is very, very closely related to something else, then that is called intertwine. Quite often we say that, let's say, the future of two companies are intertwined, or the future of the two countries are intertwined. That is, the future of both the countries are very, very closely related to each other. That is, how one does, the other will also do something very similar. Then we come to next prefix, which is trans, meaning across or over. Examples are transform, transcribe, transplant. Here transcribe basically means that whenever you are doing the writing for someone else, like you are copying for someone else, or you are writing for someone else, or you are listening to a video or an audio and then you are writing the contents of that video or audio, that process, that verb is called transcribe. Next prefix is under, which means not enough, and the examples are undervalue, underdevelop, underfund. Here the word understand can also come. Understand also is a verb which is formed by using the prefix under and the verb stand. When we use the word stand, stand can also mean your opinion on something, but when we use the word understand, that means the word stand means that you are actually standing up or you are trying to understand something, you are sitting down or something like that. So that's where the word understand comes from. Then, so we have discussed one particular combination of prefixes and verbs which form verbs. Now we move on to another type of combination. So now we come to the next combination. We are still discussing prefixes and suffixes to form words. So the next combination is when we attach a suffix to a noun to form a verb. As you can see, this is the suffix and these are some examples. The first suffix is ise, eyes, a very common suffix. Examples are stabilize, characterize, symbolize, all are very common words that you have heard. Stabilize means to basically create a situation when something that is unstable becomes a stable, something whose values or whose properties are becoming unstable, it becomes a stable. That process is called stabilize. Symbolize means that if there is something that is actually a symbol of something else or something that stands for something else, that is called symbolize. The next suffix is ate, ate. Examples are differentiate, liquidate, pollinate, duplicate. Here the word liquidate actually means that whenever you have certain property or certain asset and you actually sell that property or asset to get some money, that process of selling an asset to get cash reserves or money in terms of cash is called liquidating. So the process is called liquidating or liquidate. Pollinate, as you very well know, is related to a biological process where the flowers of any trees or plants are pollinated. Next suffix is fy, phi. Examples are classify, simplify, justify. All are very common words that we are well aware of the meanings of. Next is en. Examples are awaken, fasten, shorten, moisten. Again, these are very, very common words and the meanings of these words are very evident from the core words like moist, short, fast, awaken. Here the word fasten means actually whenever you tie something, as in fasten a seat belt. So whenever you tie something around you or you tie a rope or something around something, that process is called fasten, like fasten a seat belt. So we have discussed the different uses of prefixes and suffixes to form verbs. Now we move on to the next category. So now we move on to the next part of this chapter, prefixes and suffixes, where we discuss how prefixes and suffixes are used to form nouns. And under this subheading, the first combination that we discuss is how prefixes plus a noun forms another noun. So as you can see, this is a table formed in which the first column is of prefixes, the second column is the meaning of the prefix, and the third column consists of the examples of each prefix. So the first prefix is anti, meaning is against. Examples are anticlimax, antidote, antithesis. Here you might have heard anticlimax basically means that when you expect something to be the climax or the last chapter or at the end of any activity, or let's say in a movie or a play or some kind of a performance, something is going to happen which is according to expectation, but instead something else happens which is not according to expectations, or something which is not that interesting in the ending of something. That is often called an anticlimax. An antidote or antidote is basically a sort of an injection which is given to counter disease, or let's say counter some kind of an infection. Like it could be a snake bite, it could be a viral infection, it could be a bacterial infection. So that is what an antidote is. The word antithesis basically is the opposite of thesis, which means that if there is a certain theory or certain opinion or certain thinking about any activity or about any issue, then if there is a completely different or opposite viewpoint or thinking or theory given about the same thing, then it says that that is an antithesis to the earlier argument or the earlier opinion or thinking. The next prefix is auto, which means self. Examples are autobiography and automobile. We are very well aware of what an autobiography is or what an automobile is. Next prefix is bi, meaning to. Examples are bilingualism and biculturalism. The word bilingualism means that whenever a person or a group or any sort of people are able to speak more than one language, that is specifically two languages, then that property is called bilingualism. Similarly, biculturalism means that whenever any person or group is having properties or enjoys the properties of two cultures specifically, then that is called biculturalism. Next prefix is co, which means together. Examples are co-founder, co-owner, co-descendant. All the meanings are evidently clear from the words themselves. Next prefix is counter, which means against. Examples are counter-argument, counter-measure. Counter-measure means that whenever a certain step has been taken or certain kind of solutions to a problems are put in place, but then in order to change that situation, some very different types of steps are taken. Those are called countermeasures. Or let's say if there is a situation that is growing bad, for example, there could be a crime increasing in a city. So in order to reduce the crime or in order to improve the law and order situation in a city, the authorities or the police will take some steps. So those steps are often called countermeasures. Next prefix is dis. The meaning is the converse of or the opposite of. Examples are discomfort, dislike. Next prefix is ex, which means former. Examples are ex-chairman, ex-hunter. Another example is ex-spouse. Then next prefix is hyper, which means extreme. Examples are hyperinflation, hyperventilation. Hyperinflation is a term used in economics, which means that whenever the general prices of all the commonly used goods and services in a society start rising very fast, very high, and they reach very high values, that entire process is called hyperinflation. Hyperventilation is actually a term related to health and medical science, which means that whenever a person is not able to breathe at the normal rate and is not able to get sufficient air or oxygen inside, the person starts breathing very, very heavily and tries to make a lot of effort to take air or oxygen inside. That process is called hyperventilation. Next prefix is in, which means the converse of, that is the opposite of. Examples are inattention, incoherence, incompatibility. The word incoherence means that when there are two things or two processes or two activities, it could be two people who are not exactly compatible maybe with each other, or you can say that they are not meeting the same standards or same criteria, they are not according to the same standards, according to the same format, then such a situation is called incoherence. Or let's say if there is a piece of writing or there is some kind of a video or audio or some text which is not clearly written and there is not a logical flow to that writing or text, then that text is also called an incoherent text, or that process is called incoherence. Incompatibility, we have often heard this word. Incompatibility means that whenever two organizations, two people, or any two things which cannot exist together, live together, cannot work together because of differences in ways of working or any other kind of differences, then it is said that those two people or organizations or those two companies, whatever, are incompatible with each other. So similarly, we come to some more sets of examples related to prefixes and nouns forming new nouns. So here we continue with more examples of the combination of prefixes and nouns to form newer nouns. The next prefix is in, meaning inside. Examples are inpatient, in-house. We have often heard the words in-house when we mean that a particular group or organization or company has something within their organization. Let's say they have certain kinds of engineers or certain kinds of experts inside their organization only, and they do not need to hire any outside experts, so they will say that we have in-house experts. Inpatient is often used in clinics and hospitals, which means whenever a particular patient is actually staying overnight in a particular clinic or hospital, that is called an inpatient facility. Next prefix is inter, which means between. Examples are interaction, interchange, interference. These are all very often commonly used words, so the meanings are self-evident. Next prefix is mal, which means bad. Examples are malfunction, malnutrition. Malfunction often means that whenever a device or a machinery stops functioning according to how it is expected to, then it is said that the machine has a malfunction or the machine is malfunctioning. Malnutrition means, of course, whenever wrong nutrition or whenever some harmful substances go inside the human body or in any animal's body because of poor quality of food, then that is called a case of malnutrition. Next prefix is mis, which means wrong. Examples are misconduct, misdeed, mismanagement. Again, these are all very common words, so the examples, the meanings are self-evident. The next prefix is mini, which means small. Examples are mini publication, mini theory. Next is mono, which means one. Examples are monosyllable, monograph, monogamy, monochromatic. Here, monosyllable means one syllable. What is a syllable? A syllable is that part of sound in which there is just one single vowel. For example, the word water has two syllables, wa and ter. The word inferno has three syllables, in, fer and no. So when one single sound is there, that is called, which consisting of just one vowel. A consonant can be there along with a vowel, but when there is just one vowel in a sound, that is one single syllable. So monosyllable means one syllable. Monograph is actually a very detailed writing on a subject, on one particular subject, and it is usually done by one author. Then that very big piece of writing on one particular subject, usually by one author, is called a monograph. Monochromatic means, often we talk about monochromatic lenses or monochromatic view. Monochromatic means when there is just one single color. Monogamy means whenever a person is marrying just once or is having just one spouse, that practice or that practice in the society is called monogamy. Next prefix is neo, meaning new. Examples are neoliberalism, neo-impressionism. Now, neoliberalism is basically an economic theory or a particular concept of economics which has come into the picture in the last around 20 years of the last century, that is from the 1980s onwards, which means that more and more private sector companies, private sector organizations are going to be given more and more opportunities and more freedom in any society, in any country, in any economy to function. That entire practice is called neoliberalism. Neo-impressionism is basically a particular kind of a, you can say a particular type of a painting practice which was used in France around a little over 100 years ago, and it is derived from the word impressionism. Impressionism was a particular kind of painting techniques and painting styles that were used around 200 years ago in France, which used colors and brushes in a particular way. And when there were some changes brought about in the later half of the 19th century in France in that painting styles, then that newer style of impressionism was called neo-impressionism. Then we come to the next prefix, which is out, which means separate. Again, examples are outbuilding, outstation. The examples are already self-evident in meaning. Next prefix is poly, which means many. Examples are polysyllable. Now, as I explained earlier as well, whenever a particular word has more than two syllables, that is 3 or more syllables, then that particular word is said to be a polysyllable word or it is a polysyllable. So, we have discussed so many different types of prefixes plus nouns which form newer nouns. Now, we move on to another combination of prefixes and suffixes to form nouns. So now, we move on to the next combination of prefixes and suffixes to form nouns, and here the combination is of a suffix and a verb to form a noun. So let's see the different types of combinations under this subheading. The first suffix is shun or shun, tion or sion. The meaning is an action or an instance of doing something. That is, when a particular type of process happens, then the entire process is given a particular name, which usually ends with tion or sion. The examples are alteration, demonstration, expansion, again, very commonly used words. Next suffix is er, meaning a person who does an activity or action. That is, examples are advertiser, driver, computer, silencer. So that means not just a person, but it could also be a machine or a device or anything that does a repeated particular activity. So all such activities, when an ER is attached at the end, it becomes the noun for that device or person who does that activity. The next suffix is ment, which means an action or instance of something happening. Again, whenever there is a particular common process happening and we are using some common words for that process, if we put ent at the end or ment at the end, then that entire process is called a noun. It becomes a noun. Examples are development, punishment, unemployment. These are very, very common words used in day-to-day usage. Next suffix is age, age, meaning is result of an action. Examples are breakage, wastage, package. All these particular words are formed from verbs which showed an action that has happened in the past, and the result of that action or a verb was something that occurred, which is still there. That is, a breakage is still there, the wastage is still there, the package is still there. So that's why these are those sorts of nouns which essentially show a situation or a condition as a result of an action. Next suffix is al, meaning action or result of a verb, that is denial, proposal, refusal, dismissal. Again, very commonly used words. Next suffix is ans or ence, ance and ence. Again, the meaning is the action or result of a verb, that is the action or result of some activity happening. Examples are preference, dependence, acceptance, endurance. That is, all these actually show a certain situation that has already occurred or a certain situation that is happening. That is a preference, that is a person or something has a preference for something, that is they prefer something over something else. Dependence means again a situation where something is dependent on something else and that situation is still there. So that means dependence. Acceptance, as I've already told you, acceptance means the process when something is being accepted or something was done or something is being done or accepted. Endurance means the ability to endure, the ability to experience something that might be difficult, that might be hard, or that might be stressful. So that ability is called endurance. Next suffix is ery or ry. This means, again, this describes a repeated or regular action that often happens around us in the environment or in society, and we have given certain standard definitions for that action. Examples are bribery, robbery, misery, refinery, bakery. In all these particular examples under ERY and RY, these are some very standard processes or very standard repeated actions that happen often around us or keep happening around us, and we have given these nouns by adding a suffix to the verb. That is, when a bribe is being paid, that is an action. So bribery, a robbery, that is a robber or somebody is robbing someone, that process, so it is called robbery. Misery means a very, very difficult situation when somebody is in a very bad financial or emotional state for a period of time. Refinery, again, where coal or petroleum or oil products are refined, that process where it happens is called a refinery. Bakery, again, a particular place where a certain process which is baking of food products happens, so that is called a bakery. So now we have discussed this very interesting type of formation of words which are nouns by adding a suffix to a verb. Now let's move on further. So now we will begin discussing the next combination, which is when we add a suffix to a noun to form another noun. Here there are four different very standard and commonly used suffixes are there along with their meaning and examples. The first one is ER, meaning often is a person concerned with a noun. Examples are astronomer, geographer, cartographer, and there could be a lot of other examples like doctor. So all these examples are there. Then next is ISM, meaning doctrine of noun. Now, what this means essentially is that there is a particular kind of thought or economic philosophy or social philosophy or cultural thought which is based on the name of a person. So that entire thought or that entire way of life or that economic philosophy or cultural or social philosophy is named after a person. For example, Marxism is based on the name of Karl Marx. Maoism is based on the name of Mao Zedong. Keynesianism is based on the name of a very famous economist called John Maynard Keynes. This is a particular type of economic and social philosophy. Maoism was also a particular type of an economic philosophy and a social philosophy, and Keynesianism was also a particular type of an economic philosophy. Suffix, next suffix is ship, meaning state of being. What this means is that if there is something that is there, it has been there in the past, it is still there, a certain kind of a relationship or a situation that is existing in the past, it is there and it is going to be there in the future as well, or it has existed for a long period of time. So that state of being is defined by adding a suffix to a noun to form another noun. Examples are friendship, citizenship, leadership, very common examples. Next suffix is age, meaning is collection. It is actually, examples are baggage, garbage, plumage. So all these are again very common examples. So in this way, we have discussed a lot of different types of examples of how prefixes and suffixes are attached to different types of parts of speech to get either same parts of speech or some newer parts of speech. So now we move on. So now we move on to the next combination where we put a suffix before an adjective to form a noun. As you may note, we are still discussing the category where prefixes and suffixes are attached to words to form nouns. So this is the suffix, the meaning and examples. The first suffix is ity, ity, meaning the state or quality of being. Here, as you can see, in all the three different types of suffixes, the meaning of the suffix is the same. That is the state or quality of being. That is, when there is something that has existed for a long period of time in the past, or something that has existed in the past, it is still existing and it will exist in the future, then what is the quality, or what is the word that we use to define or describe the main quality of that state that has been there for such a long time? Those are the kinds of nouns we are discussing here. So examples are ability, similarity, responsibility. As you can see, when we attach the suffix ity to able or similar or responsible, then we get these words ability, similarity, responsibility. The next suffix is ness. Again, when we add the suffix ness to dark, we get darkness. When we attach it to prepared, we get preparedness, and similarly we get consciousness. The next suffix is cy. Examples are urgency, efficiency, frequency. That is, when we combine the adjective urgent with C, we get urgency. When we combine the adjective efficient with C, we get efficiency. And when we combine the adjective frequent with C, we get the noun frequency. So these are some very interesting examples of how suffixes are combined with adjectives to form nouns. So now let's move ahead. So now we come to another very important types of prefixes and suffixes when they are used to create adjectives. So here the first combination is when a suffix is put after a verb or a noun to create an adjective. The first example is al. Examples are central, political, national, optional. Very common words, very easy meaning words that we very frequently read or hear or use. Next suffix is ent. Examples are different, dependent, excellent. Next suffix is ive. Ive. Examples are attractive, effective, imaginative, repetitive. Again, all very common words. Next suffix is us. It is pronounced as us after a word, ous. Examples are continuous, dangerous, famous. Next suffix is full. Examples are beautiful, peaceful, careful. Next suffix is less. Some examples are endless, homeless, careless, thoughtless. Next suffix is able. Again, examples are drinkable, countable, avoidable. Of course, in all of these cases of suffixes, there are many more words that are formed, and we very frequently use them. There are some less common words as well. But as we can very clearly see how suffixes and prefixes are used in unimaginable number of times with almost all different types of parts of speech in English language to form either the same type of part of speech or some newer types of words which are some other parts of speech. So now we move on to another combination. So now we move on to the next combination of prefixes and suffixes, where we attach a prefix before an adjective to form another adjective. This is again a very interesting type of combination of words, that is adjectives with prefixes, to form newer adjectives. The interesting property or the interesting characteristic about this particular combination is that usually the prefixes are negative, like un, in, im, ill, non, dis, ir, as we are just now going to see. So as we can see, the first prefix is un. Examples are unfortunate, uncomfortable, unjust, where we can see that the prefix un is attached before another adjective like fortunate, comfortable, and just to form just the opposite adjectives of the earlier words. The next prefix is in, im, ir, ill, which are all very similar in meaning. Examples are immature, impatient, irreplaceable, inconvenient, illegal. Once again, when we put these prefixes im, ir, in, ill before words like mature, patient, placeable, convenient, legal, then the newer adjectives are just the opposite of the earlier original words. The next prefix is non. Examples are non-fiction, non-political, non-neutral. Once again, the opposite adjectives are formed. And the last prefix is dis. Examples are disloyal, dissimilar, dishonest. So this is again a very interesting case of opposite adjectives or reverse adjectives be formed in the form of putting prefixes, negative prefixes, before other adjectives. So now let's move ahead. So this is the last important segment of this particular chapter of prefixes and suffixes to form words or in word formation, which is where both prefixes and suffixes are attached to certain base words to form newer types of parts of speech or newer types of words. As we see, there are two major types of examples. One are newer adjectives are formed by actually attaching prefixes as well as suffixes to different types of words. They could be verbs, they could be adjectives, they could be nouns. Similarly, newer nouns are formed again by attaching both a prefix as well as a suffix to, generally, the base word is a verb or a noun. For example, adjectives are uncomfortable, where comfort is a noun and un and able are the prefix and suffix respectively. Similarly, inactive, where act can be a noun or a verb with in and ive as the prefix and suffix respectively. Similarly, for unavoidable. Then, similarly, nouns are formed again through this mixed approach, where dis and ment are attached before and after for the word appoint to form disappointment. Similarly, for misinformation and reformulation. And there are a lot more examples of this mixed case as well. So what we have learned in this very important segment of prefixes and suffixes is that if we are able to understand how words are formed using some very commonly used prefixes and suffixes, and whether those prefixes and suffixes, when they are used with nouns, verbs, adjectives, pronouns, adverbs, then what do they form after that? Whether they form newer types of speech or they just change the meaning of the word, we can very easily learn the meanings of so many different words that we come across, which we usually find difficult to learn and remember. So I hope you really liked this particular segment, and this is going to help you again a lot in understanding and tackling a lot of different types of verbal ability questions in your GATE exam.